Hello and welcome to another episode of Back to the Burgh, presented by the Pod Hub Network. My guest today is a Pittsburgh native with a law doctorate, but he's more commonly known for his critiques of the city's beloved sports teams, and it is how he landed a career as an NFL analyst and journalist. Please welcome Christopher Carter. Chris, what's up, man? How you doing?
What's up, Cody? Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, pleasure to have you. You're a guy that I've been following for a while now. I always love what you got to say about the Pirates or even pop culture, so I'm glad to have you on.
It's always cool to do stuff. I like this idea of getting more to know about the Pittsburgh scene because I think there's a lot to be had here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about your upbringing. Let's talk about growing up in the city of Pittsburgh in the neighborhood of Homewood. What was that like?
So I grew up in Homewood, on the Homewood Point Breeze fringe of the East End. I loved it. I grew up in, I went to Regent Square Elementary, which is now a charter school. And then I went to Rogers Kappa for middle school. I played the trumpet a lot, loved doing that. And then I ended up going to Alderdice where did football, band, and any number of activities. But I loved it. I loved growing up on the East End. I still live on the East End. I do live in Homewood now. It's a fun, it's a fun part of the town because you have all the parks that you want, but it also has a lot of stuff to do. But as a kid, my parents were very, my parents were not, I wouldn't say strict, but I was much, I guess much more contained than most kids.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be out at any number of hours. If I was out when the street lights were on, it was a problem. Um, but the other thing was I was always involved in activities. Like even before high school, I played basketball, I played baseball, I played football, I did the band, I volunteered here, I did this, I did that, and it was just every day I was doing something. So I never had time to get into anything other than that. And then the few things I did, I just played with my friends on my cul-de-sac on Penfield Court.
Nice. Now, I want to get more into the band stuff and that you played trumpet because not a lot of my guests have said that they're musically inclined. So I think that's unique. Tell me about that. When did you start playing the trumpet?
Third grade. It was actually crazy. I read a book about Wynton Marsalis when I was a little kid in my school library, and I was like, "This looks really cool." And then I asked Dad about him. My dad's a music teacher. He still is at Conroy on the North Side. And so my dad had some Wynton Marsalis albums, and so I listened to him like, "Oh, that sounds great." So then my elementary school had a band program. I got into that, played for 3 years, and then I got really into it. I really liked I really liked the sound of the trumpet, just how it just you could sing with it, you could play most melodies with it. I got really good. I started going to the Centers for Music and Talented. That got me into the middle school Kappa at Rogers. Had a great time there. But then I think it was at Rogers where I realized I don't want this to be like my life, because
Yeah.
I also got an injury that took me out of most of my 7th grade year. So I kind of missed out on some of the things but I realized I was I don't love it like that, but I do love it in the sense that I want to keep doing it. So then when I got to high school, I almost quit because our first teacher, I was just not a fan. He played, all we did was Sousa marches. It was boring. It was just like, this is the most mayonnaise I've ever. But then my sophomore year, he retires, and then we get this new teacher, Brian Lee. And Brian Lee changed my whole outlook on music. He comes in, we had 2 weeks to prepare to be the pit in the school musical when we were doing Seussical the musical, which if you don't know about musicals, Seussical is ridiculous because it is just a consistent nonstop. Like most musicals, you have breaks, you have times at the top.
Yeah.
In that musical, you play from start to finish and outside of the intermission, and it's like there's no stopping. And we got nominated for a Kelly Award, and after that, Mr. Lee came in. We played fun songs. It got me into it. He helped me. He kind of helped me refine my love for why I liked the trumpet in the first place. And so I did that with him for 3 years. Loved doing that. I was really proud when they won a Kelly Award after I graduated. But then I took that and I went to Cheney University for their marching band. And if you don't know about Cheney University, it's the first ever historically Black college university in the U.S. So it's an HBCU. And so HBCU marching bands are not your typical marching band.
No.
Like if you want a taste of it, one, you can YouTube it, but if you ever seen the movie Drumline with Nick Cannon, that's the culture they're trying to capture in that movie. Where, you know, like at Alderdice, I was taught court style marching, where when you're marching the street, it's just you step on your heel, you roll to your toe, and it's just very simple and it's casual. But when you're in the HBCU marching band, you're high stepping, your knees are coming up to your chest with every step, and you're moving and you're going and you're yelling, you're getting chants going, and then when the song comes, then you got to be loud, you got to be out there, and it's a whole extra thing. And that was probably the most fun I've ever had playing my trumpet. Was my 4 years at Cheney. We marched in Harlem, we battled bands in Philadelphia. Like I that is one of the things that I miss the most. I think that is the thing I miss the most about the trumpet, was my days playing at football games, basketball games, everything at Cheney. We even had like a jazz band when I loved jazz. That was like my favorite form of music to play. And it's awkward now because of who this is, but there was one time we're playing at a ball and we're the jazz band, and because I had done a lot of studying in music, I was often a guy relied upon to carry certain ensembles. And so we're playing jazz and we're playing an Earth, Wind, and Fire song, and I'm asked to improvise. So I do my improvise, blah, 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 and I love my improvise. I'd be loud, proud, going all over the place, using dynamics. And a celebrity walks in the room, and it was Bill Cosby. And he sits there and he's kind of like jamming to us. And then afterwards, he starts making jokes because he used to play the drums in jazz. And again, it's weird now because this is Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
But he actually talks to my band director. Like he whispers something to him, and then he walks away. And then my band director's like, he wants to talk to you. And so I grab a notepad, and so I went over and talked to him. And there's a picture of this to this day. I took it off my Facebook because I was just like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that he hurt, so I don't want to. But still, it was like that moment where I was like, this guy who is like this famous dude really thought I was good, and I thought that was an interesting story. But yeah, he was on brand Bill Cosby. He said, "You have a great ear for improvisation. You remind me of Charlie Parker." And I'm like, what? Like, okay. And then he's like, I have some great advice for you that I want you to carry with the rest of your life. And I'm thinking like, okay, this is music advice, this is professional advice. He said, don't do drugs. And I said, thank you, Dr. Cosby. And again, it is ironic that he said that, considering.
It's extremely ironic. I mean, hey, it's still like, I mean, everything he'd done aside, it's like, it's still someone they've been to the pinnacle to recognize what you're doing. That's always feels good. But
it certainly did.
I want to talk about, or not really talk about, I just want to mention, I feel like I would have had a similar road if I played the trumpet whenever I was young.
What'd you play?
But I played the trombone. It was, we don't have any trumpets left to rent out, but we have trombones. And I played it for 2 years. And I was like, they started to ask me to play in the band. It's that stigma of, the band kids don't play football, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm more of a football player. I'm going to go play football. So that's where that ended.
I totally get that. There's actually a funny story. We played some team from West Virginia when I was in Alderdice, right? Because I did both. I did marching band in all sorts of bands at Alderdice while I was a captain on the football team. So my senior year, we played some team in West Virginia. It was a really close game, went down to the wire, and it was like a noon game. So I didn't eat a breakfast. I liked to come onto the field with a little bit of like butterflies. And if I eat, like I felt like it weighed my stomach down. So I would come in lighter. I had a good game. Like we blocked, we scored some good touchdowns. I was a lineman. And, but after the game was over, there was a band competition at Montour. So as soon as the bus arrives, I throw my equipment off, and I jump on this school bus, or not school bus. A band parent was waiting for me because the band had already been there. So a band parent there. I change in the car on the way to Montour, and then I get to Montour, and I'm like, "Do you have any idea where the band is?" Like, no. And if you ain't been to Montour, it's a big school.
Yeah.
So I take my trumpet out this car, and I just start running through this school. And I'm like, "Where are they? Where are they?" And then I hear. And I'm like, oh, that's our cadence. So I'm like tracking down the cadence. I get to the cadence, and then all right. So then we're doing the practice. I have no idea what we're practicing. So I learn on the spot. I'm like, all right, we got to learn where am I stepping? What music we play? All right, cool. I think we played Louie or something like that. And so I do all this. And by the way, at this point in the day, I've played a full football game, about to be at a band competition. It's about to be like 8 p.m. So, and I haven't eaten anything.
Yeah.
So like we do it. We perform and people cheer and we walk off. Cody, all I remember is walking through the doors of the gym, and then the next thing I know, Mr. Lee, my band director, is waving a Chick-fil-A sandwich in my face. Wake up, wake up, wake up! He's like, "You passed out." I'm like, "What?"
Oh my goodness!
But that was the life of band and football. I understand, because it was a lot, and I caught a lot of hell for it in practice too. Guys used to mess around with me, and some guys like would steal my trumpet on occasion. I had to like track it down, but yeah, man, it was a different kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's one of those things that early on in my life, I was like, I got to choose one, and I'm going with football. So speaking of football, you said you were a captain on the football team. What was that experience like, playing for Alderdice?
It was different because my father was a coach at Peabody and another city school in Pittsburgh. And the they weren't like rivals, but everybody's kind of rivals when you're in the city league. So my dad, and like it was crazy because all my childhood I was a Peabody kid. Like Kevin Barlow, who went to the Niners, like I remember him when I was like a little kid, being on the practice field and all this other stuff. And I was super invested in that team. Like when I was like 10 years old, I used to like make all the Peabody teams on Madden. I'm like, all right, this is Maurice Sale. He's the wide receiver. Like, like I was that kind of a football nerd. But it was also how I got into football, because I studied film with my dad, because plenty late nights he would be constructing the tapes that he would send out to colleges for his kids. He was just an assistant coach, but he still tried to do as much as he could to help his players get to college. And so he had all these highlight tapes, and as I'm watching him, that was how I'd kind of like cheat on my bedtime. I would like sit there like, "Hey dad, what kind of defense is that? Hey dad, what kind of run is that?" And like it would usually work for about like half hour before he realized, "You're just trying to get out of sleep. Go take your butt to bed." But it got my interest in football, and then it really helped with me when I got to Alderdice, and I knew all the lineman technique. And that was the thing. I had asthma, so I was never fast. I could never, and even when I got a little bit of speed, I couldn't keep it up because I would always just start wheezing and huffing. But on the line, I knew the techniques because my dad was a line coach. So I was very undersized, but by the time I was a senior, I worked my way to being a starter because I was so good at my technique. And I don't think it clicked for me because I wasn't ever like a mean guy on the football field until like I'd say like a couple weeks into my senior year. Because my thing was, all right, I just got to do my job. I just got to block my guy. And it wasn't until my senior. Well, no, I would say I got that a little bit my junior year, but senior is when I filled out my body and I got really strong. But that was when I realized I have to bury someone every single play. I can't just block and shield you one way to make sure my running back goes the other way. And when it clicked for me there, that's when football got really fun. And the thing was I never missed a practice, so my coaches appreciated that about me. And I wasn't the best football player, but I was good enough to start. And I was a guy that some of the guys on the team told me they looked up to me, and that always meant a lot to me. So I miss it. Like when I smell fresh cut grass in summer, I'm like, like there's that sense there. And I wish I could still play football, but pandemic stuff have kind of even halted like flag leagues at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun. But like when I went to college, I was like, oh, I know I'm not about that life.
Yeah, I wish I would have realized that. I played 1 year of D3 ball, and I was just like, nah. Like
it's just another level of life commitment, man. Right?
Yeah.
Like
I was just like, I'd rather graduate, instead of dedicate my life to being on Division III football team. Not that there's anything wrong with D3.
Right.
It's just that
yeah.
I didn't see myself. I was a 5'11" left tackle, and they shifted me to guard.
Yeah.
And I was like, they already don't want me to play my position that I know like well. So why keep going?
Right. Like it's just, and again, you just got to find, like if Cheney, they wanted me to play football, because also Cheney's football team is like one of the worst. They had to close the football team a few years ago. But I mean, like if you ever watch The Water Boy, and there's that one ESPN scene where they're explaining how bad this fictional school is that Adam Sandler attends. They're listing like it amongst the worst college football teams of all time. And on this fictional list was my school, Cheney University.
Oh, no.
Like that's how bad it was. And so it's like, there was a point I was like, I could try some college ball. I could, do my thing. And then I looked at the record. I was like, oh no, I'm not getting my butt kicked every day to get my butt kicked every
Yeah,
Saturday. No. And it worked out that way because in my 4 years of playing in the band, we only won 2 games, and they were both games that we did not play at. So I still have never seen in person Cheney win a football game.
Yeah, no, that also went into my decision to stop playing college ball because, like, I came from a program where it's like we were used to going to playoffs. Like, we went to the semifinals my junior year, like, and then I went to college and we were like a 500 squad, and I was like, I'm not used to losing, especially on the football field. I don't want to get used to it. So I was like, nah, I'm done. So I do want to talk to you about your time at Cheney, and it being an HBCU. It seems like now, like, it's becoming, or HBCUs are being talked about more in the mainstream. I mean, you got Deion Sanders, who's coaching at Jackson State.
Mm-hmm.
Just there's more talk about HBCUs. I just want to know, what do you think about that, and do you think it's like about time that people start talking about HBCUs more?
Absolutely. And I mean, the history of HBCUs is just so important. And I think it's important for people to understand what an HBCU is, because a lot of people say, oh, that's a black school. Like, it's a historically black school. It was founded in times when either it was A, illegal for black people to go to school with white people, or B, when it was discouraged. Like Cheney University, we're founded in 1837. Slavery was going on.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And then even a lot of HBCUs were founded in the early 1900s, even the mid 1900s, when it was just most schools still weren't integrated in the 60s. So there's that's kind of where HBCUs come from. But I mean, there's still such amazing culture and so many amazing people. Most black professionals statistically come from HBCUs still. It's an environment where, as a black person, like when I was at Alderdice, I was a black kid, and I'm mixed also. My mom's white, my dad's black, but you identify African American most of the time when you're mixed, because you're still discriminated against like you're an African American, and you are. But growing up, I always had to deal, when I was at Alderdice, I had to deal with people who were like didn't understand who Malcolm X was, or told me, well, Martin Luther King didn't know he was going to get assassinated. It just happened, and he didn't have any reason to fear for his life. And I'm looking like, you crazy?
Yeah.
Like, you understand how? And like, it was so, like, I was known as most black students are in high school. You're known as the Black History buff if you're the black kid in the white classroom. And every time there was a Black History question, they look at me. Now, the thing is, most times I'd know because my father was a teacher and he was instilled that in me. And I read all sorts of books. I even got into a national Black History contest where my senior year, Alderdice had a team and we won the city contest. And so then we represented Pittsburgh in a national contest in Las Vegas, and we placed in the top 8 in that contest. It was actually really cool. But at an HBCU, none of those questions happen. Like at Alderdice, I dealt with racism. I had neo-Nazis as classmates. I had people, say that I was stupid because I was black, and like having to argue with that and fight that. And even have teachers who thought less of you because of the color of your skin. That's still something that existed then and still exists today in a lot of schools. But when you're at Cheney, you don't have to worry about that, because everybody understands the culture. Everybody understands that struggle. And that goes for pretty much all the HBCU experiences. So, and there's white people that go to HBCUs. A lot of white people are like, oh, I can't go there. I'm like, yes, you can. In fact,
Yeah.
would love it if you did, because they love diversity. So it's an amazing culture that I think more people are getting hip to. Where the sports aspect of it is, like, that's really interesting, Cody, is historically HBCUs were where a lot of superstars came from, because black athletes just didn't get as much shine at white schools, at predominantly white schools. And you still had like your Pitts, your Syracuses, your Notre Dames that brought in the ones they really liked. But the majority of players, black players, still, I mean, that's what made the Steelers of the 70s.
Exactly.
Guys like Mel Blount, Ernie Holmes, just like left and right. And then eventually, when you saw the rush in the 80s, when like Walter Payton and Jerry Rice, they went to HBCUs. And after people realized, after like the D1 programs, they were like, oh wait, we are letting that kind of talent slip away.
Yeah.
That changed the dynamics, and now HBCUs aren't powerhouses anymore as far as developing that kind of talent.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, look at the work that Bill Nunn did as the scout for the Steelers. He brought in that entire team that ran the 70s. So it's something, to keep everybody, like, it should be a bigger part of American history, in my opinion. And I want to go back to what you said about like like growing up in public schools and like being the minority. I feel like even the education itself, I don't want to get too much into this conversation.
You're fine.
It just popped up into my head. Like like you said, people were like, "Oh, he didn't know he was MLK didn't know he was going to get assassinated."
Mhm.
And it's like that's kind of what we were taught in public school, is that, oh, he just got assassinated one day.
Mhm.
And it's like, with how much information we're able to pull at once now with the internet and the accessibility of it, it's like you would expect these things to change, and unfortunately I don't think they have.
No, I agree. It's unfortunate. Like, again, I went to Alderdice, and that's in a Jewish neighborhood of Squirrel Hill, and I had a lot of Jewish friends. But like, I once had an argument where they were trying to tell me that like more, there weren't as many black people that died in the African diaspora in the slave trade or went through the slave trade as many as the Holocaust, and I'm like, that's just factually incorrect. and
Mhm.
and it's like that's how mistaught or not taught Black history is, growing up in most parts of the country. I mean, if you go down south, there's a lot of people that think that the Civil War is about states' rights and not about slavery.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating. It's something that you kind of have to deal with, and it's something that I think that that a lot of Black people need to get therapy for when they get out of it. And then it was kind of weird also going from Alderdice to Cheney and then back to Pittsburgh, where I was in, I was at Pitt. So
Yeah.
I'm like, well, back into this. And I think it definitely helped me a lot find myself at Cheney, because I had people believe in me and pull things out of me that I didn't even know existed. Like, my stuff with my band, I became like, I was student government president at Cheney. I was the NAACP president. I did all these leadership things. I did so many different projects that I never, like, I was told when I was at Alderdice, my guidance counselor said, you shouldn't apply to Carnegie Mellon. You shouldn't apply to Ivy League schools. Even though I had a 3.76 GPA, was a captain
Yeah.
on the football team, was a trumpet section leader, and all this other things on my resume. They said, you wouldn't do so well there. You need to go to like, Penn, Penn State off campus. And I'm like, you think that little of me?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. When I was at Cheney, they were like, dude, you can do whatever you want as long as you put your mind to it. And that motivated me to step out of myself and figure out where my strengths and weaknesses were.
Yeah, no, and I learned these things like once I went to college. Now that I'm out of college, you kind of learn the real history, and it's very eye-opening. And I don't know, it's just stuff that it's like I can't believe we're not telling the truth in public school. So I want to move on though and talk about your college career a little more, and the fact that you went to school to get a doctorate in law.
Mhm.
Now you're writing sports. Like, let's just talk about that story.
Yeah, sure. So the transition really started. I was working my second summer of law school, and um, I was working an unpaid internship at the federal public defender's office downtown in Pittsburgh, and I was loving it. I to this day I think Aiken Adepoju, he was the guy that was really my mentor there. I worked with him a ton. He showed me a lot about where I needed to work on and what I needed to do and what it meant to be a real defense attorney. And I was like, wow, this is like really engaging. And some of the cases that I got to see there were just fascinating. But when I was there, I realized I need to make some money.
Yeah.
And so I was applying to like, just physical jobs, like, retail or, bar service, whatever. But then my mother sent me a Craigslist ad for a Steelers blog. And I was like, huh, okay, whatever. So it was like, right. And so this was the summer of 2013. And so this was right what was it the summer of 2012? I think it was 2013. One of the two. No, it's 2013 because yeah, that would have worked. But it was right about who's going to be the leading rusher for the Steelers, and that year, and it was right like a 400-word thing, and I wrote like just a short little blurb, and I was just like, and it was like, it's obviously going to be Le'Veon Bell because he's a new running back, and Todd Haley's not afraid to use new running backs. And within an hour, I get a call from the editor of Behind the Steel Curtain, Neil Coulong. He's like, "Who the hell are you?" And And Neil and I have a conversation, and he's like, "Well, you obviously have your head on, right? So I'd like you to come on." Now I was still unpaid by behind the steel curtain, but it was something fun to do. And then eventually, like when school got back going, I wouldn't write for a while. But then when Neil left, Jeff Hartman took over, and he's still the editor now. And he said, "Hey, I need you as my right hand man. You're one of the best football minds in the site. People don't know it." And he got me paid from behind the steel curtain, and it wasn't a whole lot, but it was enough to say like, "Hey, this justifies me investing a little bit more time in it." So I'd write on occasion. I did it, towards the end of, when I graduated law school, and then even when I started working after law school, and I did that for years, for like a few years, and I started developing. I learned how to edit film and turn it into a GIF, and that was my biggest thing. Is I wanted to learn how to do that, and once I learned how to do it, I was like, let's get this film analysis cracking. And that's people are like, yo, Chris knows what he's talking about. I'm like, I know, right?
Yeah. Now, before we keep going, I want to know, why did you get into law in the first place and then decide to switch?
Well, I mean, I've always been a person who wanted to advocate for other people and to fight for other people and to help. When I was at Cheney, right, I ran for student government president, won it, and my initial goal was to help get more power in conversations, more leverage in conversations for students, because our student body was, and I guess I should paint the whole picture, is that in 2008, when the first Obama election happened, I was a campus organizer that worked on the campus, and I was also a vice president on the NAACP board there, and we registered the entire campus to vote. And that night when Obama won, I was told by the local Democratic chair of Delaware County, he's like, Chris, you have flipped this county blue for the first time since like the Civil War.
Wow.
And he's like, no person has ever done this. And I was like, whoa. And he's like, yeah, like you Cheney University, you did this. And I still remember to this day, during the broadcast, Wolf Blitzer was like doing a map on CNN, and he was like, this is Delaware County. If the Republicans can't win this, they can't win anything. And we were like, we did that? And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. I started working with the United States Student Association on student rights and, fighting for more funding and more scholarship money, increasing Pell Grants. And I realized like, wow, there's so many things. There's so many things that there's so many things that go into just what things that we don't know about how students and people are just screwed in today's in today's world. And so that opened my eyes to that. And so my fighting for as student government president, Cheney, I was fighting for on-campus things, in strengthening. Like I realized there were some underhanded things that were happening with the state. There was actually a settlement that Cheney won years ago to get to that said like, hey, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, you have underfunded us as a state university proportionate to every other state university. And the settlement gave Cheney University 2 major scholarship programs, one of which I was on. And then my senior year, I'm getting ready, to graduate and everything. And it was like that February or that March, early March, Tom Corbett, the new governor of Pennsylvania, releases a new budget, and it completely slashes those scholarship funds as well as others. And that was a red alarm. And so we got to work. We went to organizing. We went all over the state. We went to Harrisburg. We got as much political support as we can. And we did a lot, like Cheney University, we did a walkout on campus. Like there's still a video out there somewhere of me giving speeches and stuff. But we did a walkout on campus. We organized rallies at Harrisburg, and people really responded. And we got State Senator Vincent Hughes, who was one of our biggest allies. He told me, he was like, you guys doing all this organizing gave us the ammunition to fight for your scholarships. And that's what kept it. And to this day, I believe those scholarships still do benefit Pennsylvanians all the time. So that was a huge win for us. And then from there, I was like, I want to still advocate for people, but I didn't know how. And I was like, well, law school, that maybe there's something there. And so I went to law school. I was still figuring out, like at first I wanted to do labor attorney work, but then I interned at a labor office, and I was like, I'm okay. And then, criminal defense sounded interesting, but it was also kind of like shaky, but I was like, okay. And then after I graduated, there was a big lull of trying to find a job in Pittsburgh, and the legal market it's just been rough. And in fact, and it's even, and what's crazy is, they always say when it's rougher for everybody, it's usually even rougher for Black people. And that certainly was the case. There was I would send out applications everywhere. I wouldn't get callbacks. And there was one time I got a callback, and I got a phone interview, and over the phone I give a great interview, and the person says, "Listen, you're already hired. Like we're just coming. We have to do a formal interview, sit down, but like I'm telling you, you're starting like next week." So I'm like, okay, cool, this is great. So I suit up, get a fresh haircut, get extra copies of my resume, all the tricks that I've known in my life.
Yeah.
And I go into the office and I sit around and I wait. They call and I'm the only person in this waiting room. And this lady comes out, and by her voice, I know it's the same person I spoke to, because she had this weird twang to it. So I was like, she was like, "Christopher Carter," and she looked around, and I stood up. I said, "Hi," and then she looks around and she says, "Christopher Carter," and I said, "Hi, that's me. I'm Christopher Carter." And I put my hand out. She's like, "Oh, hi," and I was like, okay, weird, but all right, whatever.
Yeah.
So we go in. We do practically the same interview. And what's, one thing I always learned was always dazzle your interviewer. You always try to give, if they ask the same question twice, don't give the same answer twice. Give them a better answer, expand, give them all that. So I did all that. I bring out all my stuff. I show them like, hey, like I'm up on all the word processing programs. I'm up on all this different stuff here. I can type really fast. I know how to research, Westlaw and all this other stuff. So like, I know my stuff here. And she's like, "Okay, great. I'll be back in like 5 minutes." So she comes back in 5 minutes. She says, "Sorry, but you're too qualified." I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? Right. That, your face that you just made is where I was like, "Excuse me?" And she said, "You're like, well, our clients, we feel like, we feel like you might leave after you get like a few months in here and then go get a better job." And I said, "Well, what? Like, first of all, no, I told you, like, I'm looking to work for somewhere for like good 4 or 5 years, establish myself, pay my bills, and get myself situated."
And it's like at the time, nobody else is hiring. So,
Right. And I'm like, who, I'm here to work, and I'm telling you,
yeah.
I'm here to commit it. And she was like, "No." And I'm like, "Well, ma'am, how am I supposed to get myself established in this field? Because if you told me I had this job, and now you're telling me I can't have this job because I'm too qualified. Well, if I'm too qualified to have this job and not qualified enough to have the higher paying jobs, what job should I get?" And she said, "You would make what you should really consider, you would be a great bouncer." And I said, "With my JD, my summa cum laude degree from Cheney, with all these internships, and and how you told me I would be a great fit, your best response to me was I should go be a bouncer?" And so I was like, "Okay, thank you for that advice." And so I took that with me, and it took me like a couple hours, but I was like, what was the only thing that changed from over the phone to in person? And it was, she saw what I looked like. And I've seen it for years, guys who had, who didn't work as hard, getting certain opportunities, and as a Black law graduate of the Pitt Law, there's still Black people that are getting jobs here in Pittsburgh. There's a lot of Black people that just leave because they're like, it's impossible to get jobs here. It's impossible to find your way here. And it's not impossible because people have done it. I mean, my father did it as a teacher, but it's a lot more difficult. And I mean, to be honest, I had offers to leave Pittsburgh, to go to Philadelphia. The Cheney foundation that I had, they were like, "Hey, come out here," but I wanted to make it work here in Pittsburgh because this is my home, and I've seen the racism that happens in our city, and I didn't want to run away from it. And doing that has taken a toll because it's a grind to fight it, and it's frustrating every day. But that's kind of why I stuck around here, and I started working on the jobs, and then I kept writing, and that's when DK found me while I was working at Behind the Steel Curtain. And that led to kind of that transition. I still want to get back to law at some point. I still want to help. I still want to find ways to organize. I still work at where I volunteer for the Community Empowerment Association in Homewood. I'm on their board of directors. Even I do, I've helped organize events. Whenever there's stuff going down, they come to me for advice, and we look over things. I've helped written a few of their proposals to the city about how we of legal policies and plans that could help Black communities in Pittsburgh. So I still find my ways to do those things, but It was just, the offer that I got from Dejan Kovacevic to come full time to his job that I was like, well, that was one I think I should take.
Yeah, and before we get into the rest of your journalism career, I saw in your bio on DK's website that you are involved in a lot of community work and like charities. I just want you to talk to us a little bit about all that stuff and kind of just give awareness to that stuff.
Yeah, I've always tried to volunteer wherever I can. The Community Empowerment Association is kind of where my hub is. When the Hill House was a thing, I did work with that. I've always been about organizing and trying to get, whenever, like Black Lives Matter has been a big part of my, my just like the movement and seeing anything. Like when Antoine Rose happened here, I'm working 2 jobs, actually 3 jobs at the time, and I don't have all the time to invest in it. But then when the word got out, like, hey, there's going to be a march tonight in East Liberty. We need men to kind of stand on the lines here and make sure things go smoothly. And so I went to East Liberty, got in the call, and we kind of we kind of patrolled the outsides and made sure it was peaceful. And it was crazy because there were people in that raid. I won't say their names here because the whole point was for us to be anonymous. Like we kind of like wore hoodies, and we were just like, we're not here to take the spotlight off of the the students and the younger people that organized. And like at one point there was one kid, and this kid was like 13, 14 maybe, and like we're marching, and he's mad like everyone else is mad. Like, like we're tired of Black people getting killed and then nothing happening. And so he's just, and out of frustration, he kicks a garbage can over, and like 2 of us walk up like, yo, young man. He's like, I'm sorry, I'm just really frustrated. Like, hey, that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this. Nothing, that was the furthest they got to violence that night. And stuff like that happens. And I've seen, and some of it's yielded some crazy days. Like there was a meeting we did, and this is, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago now, but we were at the Community Empowerment Association, and we were hosting a community forum on how we can better improve relationships with our local police department. And because they said, police officers used to have a beat. They used to walk through the streets and get to know the people and come up. And we're like, that doesn't happen, especially in Homewood and the Hill and Black neighborhoods of Pittsburgh. And so as this meeting's, starting to wrap up, 2 guys leave, and one's a journalist, he was a photographer, and the other's like a younger teacher. And so they're talking, and like, we're kind of starting to file out, and across, and they're kind of standing on the sides of Kelly Street, which is where it's actually, Kelly Street's where I live, but it's also further down is where CEA is at. And a police car kind of speeds by them as they're standing next to their cars and almost hits them. And they're like, whoa, that was weird. But then the cop car stops, turns around, comes back, and he's like, hey guys, you guys should really, sorry about that. I almost hit you guys. You guys should really, write me up for that. And they're like, no, it's fine. Go on about your business. You fine. And he's like, no. I was driving really recklessly there. You guys should really, you guys should write me up. And so the photographer, who was an older gentleman, he was kind of like, no, sir, please. And the teacher, who was younger, was like, you know what? You did almost kind of hit us. I would like to know your badge number. And so the car says, all right, hands on the car right now. And we're like, whoa, what's happening here? And then all of a sudden, the photographer, like, he knows, he looks like much older, like he's been through the struggles. He immediately he puts his hands in the car. He's like, I'm messing with this. The teacher's like, I have done nothing wrong. Mm-hmm. Do not put your hands on me. I have broken no law. I only did as you were suggesting that I do. And so then the police officer ends up tackling him, and then we're like, hey, get outside. And so then the rest of us like, officer, it's okay. They're teachers. They're with us. We're working with you guys. And the police officer's like, we got a riot here on Homewood. And so within 5 minutes, there's 17 police cars, police dogs, and all sorts of people saying, trying to calm the situation down. And all of us have our hands up like, hey, this is not that big a deal. And so then, the police, and meanwhile, the teacher's getting his face shoved into the pavement by this police officer, is just going off, flying off the handle. And then Mr. Rashad Birdsong, who has been for decades a standout leader in the community. He's stood up for, he puts his hands up, starts walking toward the police like, hey guys, you guys know me. I talk with Mayor Peduto all the time. They mace him. And he's like, are you kidding? And so seeing in that moment, it's like, wow, like as we're trying to do the thing to tell our community that we can trust our police officers and work with them, they are accosting us and assaulting us and beating us, and won't listen to reason in this moment. And moments like that just kind of bring into like the factor of like, wow, like this is the part of the work, is also like organizing, talking to people, and trying to bridge those gaps. And it ain't easy, but it's also something that someday I think I'd like to invest more time into. It's just right now I work a lot of hours in my personal business, so that just takes
Yeah.
up a lot of time.
Yeah, and I mean, we obviously, it's awesome what you're doing for the community. That's an unfortunate situation. It sucks. And I
Mhm.
hope that your work I hope DK gives you more time to work on that stuff so it doesn't happen again. But speaking of DK, let's talk about your work with DK Pittsburgh Sports. You said before that you started with Behind the Steel Curtain and you just learned how to do everything on the fly. So how did you get that job with DK?
So if when I became part-time was um it was 2016. It was the summer of 2016. I was working for a small attorney office. It was a small criminal family. It was small criminal mainly practice, and wasn't having a great time. The person I worked for I did not like, but I needed to pay bills.
Yeah.
And DK came along and gave me an offer to be part-time, and I was like, you know what, that'll pay the bills while I figure something else out. So I took DK's offer to come with right from part-time. He said he loved my work at Behind the Steel Curtain, said I had a great voice. And then when he started, when he put me on like the first couple morning Javas, he was like, whoa, you can like talk on camera too. And I said, yeah. That comes with when you go to law school, you learn to speak out in front of everybody. Um, but yeah, so then after that, the 2016 season, I do other jobs while I work for DK. And then 2017, he had me travel with Dale for games, and with Marco Boli first. We switched to Dale Lally mid-season, but that's another thing. But that was when I started to get a real taste of what it would be like if I was full-time covering sports. And I was starting to get a feel for how to talk to players in the locker room and what questions to ask and how to push that. Because I've always been very good at just writing my own opinion and just be like,
Yeah.
hey, here's what I cite, here's my stats, here's my film, my argument, boom, that's an article. But using quotes that I had to ask for, that was the kind of the transition I had to make. And I was very fortunate to get with DK Pittsburgh Sports, because between Dejan Kovacevic and Dale Lally, I've learned a lot on how to better improve my work as a journalist. So I did that for years. And between that, I found I found some really good opportunities eventually in the Pittsburgh market. And I started working, got with a good company and was doing really good work for them, got promoted, and was really in a comfortable spot. And then it was this past summer when Dejan was like, hey, do you want to go full time? And at first I was like, I'm okay. But eventually I was like, you know what, if the money's right, I'll do it. And eventually he made sure the money was right. And so now I'm here working full time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, to be able to work for a guy that's kind of built his brand from the ground up
Hmm.
and be able to stay in Pittsburgh and do that in your hometown is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely a blessing to be able to do it here. And one thing that really sticks out to me in both writing and TV and radio and podcasting, is I do all the things. But it makes me really proud when a Black person from Pittsburgh says, I see you and you make me proud. Like I was getting dinner with my girlfriend on the North Shore this past weekend, and I'm chilling and we're sitting outside, and this middle-aged Black man like stops his tracks. And I didn't even see him. My girlfriend saw him at first. And he was like, that's the brother. He's like, hey, yo, Chris Carter. And I said, yes, I am. And he's like, yeah, yo, I be watching you on TV, man. Me and my kids, you just be giving it to them dudes on TV, man. And I'm like, thanks, man. That means a lot. And it's not just him. I mean, former players that my dad coached. Like I said, when I was the water boy, I was the film. I got to carry the film. I carried the pads, at the Peabody practice for years. The guys that I used to look up to, who, some went to have, professional collegiate careers. They'll see me on the city like, yo, it's Luke Carter. I see you, man. Like, you make me so proud. Like, I knew you was going to be and it's just those type of things. I'm like, wow, that means a lot. So
Yeah.
there's an immense sense of pride when people from my own community see me, and they remember seeing me, because my dad, when I was a little kid, He would sometimes give me one of those big camcorders because we have phones now and there's even like little cameras. But back in like the 90s, you had the super duper camcorders that were like ridiculously big. So he would send me to high school football games and tell me to sit at the top of the stands and just get like a full view of the field. And so I'm like 8, 9 years old, and I love NFL prime time. And so like if you oftentimes he would just mute the sound and just watch the film. But if you turn the sound on, a lot of the times you'd hear me being Chris Berman. Boom, and like there he goes, and it's like whoopee could go all the way. And like one time it happens at a film session with all the players, and they start cracking up. My dad says, "Don't ever do that again." But it was kind of a sense like people remembered that about me, and they were like, "Man, like we always knew that you were into sports, and it's so cool to see you." Showing people that you know what the heck you're talking about and representing us that we can do this because there's not a lot of black faces in Pittsburgh media.
Yeah. Hey, did you ever put any of those clips of you talking on your reel?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
That's perfect. Show people where you came from, you know?
Look, man, those are locked away in a safe that y'all will never find. I guarantee y'all that.
Oh, I love that. Now I want to talk more about the the up and coming I don't really know. It's just like a independent content creator scene that's coming about, from my perspective. You have Around the 412. It started like 3 years ago. North Shore 9, who's a Pirates podcast, they started around the same time. And just people have just been getting on the Pittsburgh sports content train, doing exactly what I'm doing. Just I'm in my house in a room just talking about what I want to talk about that relates to Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And you recently had the Yinzers on your podcast, Locked On Steelers. And I just want to know, like, what are your thoughts on this new, like, independent content boom?
I think it's great. I think it's awesome to have people getting their voices out there more. I think I think part of the problem for the years has been the gatekeeping, as far as people not getting opportunities. And for a long time, I thought that was where I'd be stuck, behind the steel curtain. I was like, I'm just going to be this blog guy, and that'll be cool. Like people just know me as the blog guy. That's fine. And that because I was planning on having a full on legal career where I was making money that way, and this would just be like a hobby of mine. Well, then this became a thing, and I was like, well, now we're gonna put more effort to this. And I don't think that everyone should have the opportunity to have a voice. Not everybody should be out there talking though. There's a lot of people who say opinions, and I'm just like, okay, you stay over there. And but there are people I do check out. I still check out my Behind the Steel Curtain family with Jeff Hartman and what they do over there. They do great work. On occasion, if I'm listening, I'll check out like a local podcast that pops up. And Yinzers was just one that I was like, whoa, okay, they got Juju and his family on. They had Brooke Pryor on, and I've had Brooke on my show, and Brooke, of course, ESPN. That's a big deal. And so I've been like, okay, well, let me see who these young ladies are. And so I listen to their shows, and I like what they're putting together. It's obvious they're fans, and a lot of people were like, oh, they're just fans. Like, yes, they are, but they're fans doing a podcast. They're not pretending to be anything else.
Yeah.
And to me, that's perfectly fine. I think that it's cool to have more, increase of mediums out there because again, it diversifies the field. I think it makes all of us better. Now, again, when you're malicious with it, I think there's some people out there that just say ridiculous things, and I think that doesn't help. But that comes with everything, like how there's more music available today than there were 20 years ago because of all the ways to publish your music and to get people to hear it. You don't gotta sell mixtapes out of your trunk no more. You can on Spotify and bang, it's out there. And with that, there's a lot of great people that we never would have heard of, but there's a lot of bad people we're like, we don't ever want to hear from again. I think it's the same sort of thing with the whole content creation. It's like it just gives you more to sort through, but I still stand behind more is better.
Yeah, and I want to get into your point of, they're fans and they're nothing other than fans. But then you also have people like, I would say my friends at Around the 412, Smitty in particular, he's a fan of Pittsburgh sports, but he's also really good at writing for Pittsburgh sports and giving an honest opinion about things. So when it comes to being, a journalist or a columnist and also being a fan, do you think you need to pick one or the other, or do you think you can be a fan and a columnist?
No, you need to. If you're a columnist, you need to step away from it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a columnist, you need to step away from it. and you need to be able uh, to have objectivity. And listen, everybody in their heart of hearts, when they watch a game, they're rooting for a side. You know, they want a group to win over another group. And most guys that cover Pittsburgh sports want the Pittsburgh team to win, especially if you're from here. Um, but you still have to keep that out of your reporting, as best you can. Like, like when I write about the good and the bad, and I give my realistic takes on who I think, needs to improve, or who I think is carrying the team, and this, that, and the third. Um, and Yeah, like it's a I think that's part of the struggle that some of the fans. And one thing, like, I had to do when I was working up behind the steel curtain, I can still, that's a fan blog, you can write whatever you want there. But like, I had to get out of rooting for the Steelers, because I was like, well, in the press box, and it took me a little bit of adjusting at first in the press box, because I'm looking at it from that perspective. But by, like, my second year, I was like, I'm used to this now. And like there was one time when the Steelers, I guess, when the year was, what, 2-3 seasons ago now, when Antonio Brown didn't show up at the Bengals game, and then the Steelers win the game barely, but then they have to watch to see if the Browns or the Ravens make the playoffs, or the Browns. If the Browns win, the Ravens are out and the Steelers are in, but the Browns lose and the Ravens go into the playoffs. The Steelers miss it, and like, I was like kind of content. I was like, it doesn't bother me. And Mark Caboli, who used to work for DK Pittsburgh, he was like, wow, really? Like, I'm like, yeah, man. Like, I was not sure. Like, this, now I know I can go to Thailand for this wedding that was planned. like I had those whole plans. Now I can go and not stress about it, because I was thinking I might not be able to make this wedding that my friends are doing. That was an insane trip. But yeah, like it's more so now, like, I'm part of the crew. Like, the first thing I'm rooting for is a short game. I would not mind if this game ended at like 3:30, 3:45 instead of 4 o'clock. And it's and the same thing goes for Pitt stuff. Like, when it's an earlier game, I'm like, yeah, let's go, let's get out of here. I want to get home, eat dinner, and still have time to, like, watch something on TV and hang out with my girlfriend, those type of things. So that's definitely part of it.
Now, is that a tough transition to make, though, to go from being a fan to being a journalist?
Not if you do it the right way. Like my father always instituted in me is, like, be fair. Like, when you're talking about things, when you're um when you're even when you're watching as a fan, let's look at this objectively. And so I would always try to come from, like, where I try to come from in a conversations. I always try to weigh, multiple sides and see, as far as try to come in from different sides and consider different options. And like, that's where I think a lot of fans run into the problem of, they can't root for, or they can't find themselves rooting for a player on another team. Like for example, most Pittsburghers hate Lamar Jackson, and I'm like, I am not a hater of Lamar Jackson. People, like, I think he's actually very good. And I like seeing most people succeed, unless you're a jerk.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
right. Like, if you're someone, like, who you beat up your wife, or you do something odd, like, that's a whole different story. I'm not rooting for you. Sorry.
Yeah.
But the general human being, I want to see someone do well. If I think that's the amazing part of sports, excuse me. Is trying to see, trying to see how, a person overcomes their own struggles, other struggles, and what, where something's going. So that to me is the biggest thing, that if you're a fan out there who's doing something like this and you want to break into journalism, you got to find the story in that. And to me, where I found my niche that got me into it was, my story was what they did on film, how a player overcame this strength or this weakness, or the strength of the other team, and showing, concepts and, like, the mental part of the game, not just the physical part of it. So to me, become immersed in those types of things, and then you start to tear away, like, oh, I really want, Ben Roethlisberger to win this game. And you say, you know what, I really appreciated the way Ben Roethlisberger, figure this out. Or, man, this was disappointing to see that he regressed in this way, from where, that he can achieve certain accomplishments. So that would be my suggestion. But don't let none of that stop you from trying. That's the big thing I'd say to everyone out there that wants to go on that path.
Yeah, no, I mean, for myself, I've noticed, like, I kind of look at the game the same way you just described. It's like, I just want people to do well. You know, I'm fans. I'm not, I wouldn't say diehard fan of other teams and players, but I'm a fan of their work ethic and the players that they are. Whereas when I go on Twitter and I try to talk about those people, I have radical Steeler fans who are like, "Oh, how could you root for that person?" Blah blah blah. And just as that independent podcaster or journalist or whatever you want to call yourself, it kind of puts you down whenever people attack you like that.
Yeah.
Because it's like I'm just trying to be fair in what I'm trying to do, and I have these people that they usually like what I say coming at me and being like, "Oh, you're not a real Steeler fan," and it's like, no, I look at the game as it is. I don't look at it as I'm Steelers or nothing. So I
Mhm.
think that's something that a lot of people they don't really realize is that you have to kind of separate the fandom from the game, but you can still at the end of the day be in that you can have a perfect middle kind of.
Right. Yeah. I think you can find that middle ground. That's not a problem. At
Yeah.
least for me. Um, and, and and oftentimes I think that's what will set you apart as a journalist is trying to figure out, um, um, try to figure out how to balance those two worlds because you still want these guys to win and like that's the thing. Like a lot of people will come at say you where you're at Cody where you saying like, oh, you're a fanboy. It's like okay, calm the heck down. I'm yes, I am a fan of these teams, but at the same time I'm also trying to report on this thing. But there's people like Mark Madden. He tweeted out last night, I love the Penguins, I'm a fan of the Penguins. And it's like it's okay to admit that you are in that situation as long as when you're covering them it doesn't seep through what your work is.
Yeah,
um
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and it's okay if someone says like, hey, it's obvious that you like this team. It's like anytime I talk about Lamar Jackson, anyone can tell I like Lamar Jackson. I've been a fan of his since he was at Louisville. I'm like, that dude knows how to ball.
Yeah.
The same thing goes for how the Steelers play. I'm a big Heat guy in NBA. I love LeBron James. It comes to hockey, I want the Penguins to win their games. There's like that part of your game is still part of it, but when you're doing the work, you take that out of it and you say, you know what, when I'm trying to think like Mike Hilton. Mike Hilton was one of my favorite Steelers to talk to when I first started working. 2017 was the first year that again I got to like go in the locker room and start doing that, and he was like one of the first people that really opened up to me when I asked like concept questions, because a lot of people would give me basic answers like Cam Hayward, the guys that are team leaders, they would give you like good answers but not delve into X's and O's. But Mike would give me really good questions, but really good answers there. So I became invested. I'm like, man, this Mike Hilton dude's for real. And this was when people still were like not sure who he was.
Yeah.
But when Mike Hilton messed up, even though in my head I'm rooting for Mike Hilton to succeed, I'm like, man, look at this brother go. But when he messed up, I still had to say, hey, Mike needed to do this better. And the same thing goes for any player in any sport. When Lamar messes up, I say, hey, this is a horrible read on Lamar Jackson's part. Or anyone out there, like I'd say Larry Fitzgerald because he's one of my favorite players of all time, but Larry Fitzgerald never messes up. So,
but no, that kind of brings me to just the last kind of funny thing is
mhm.
I always like to poke fun at the Pirates, and like I look at them objectively. I'm a fan, but I look at them objectively. Anytime they do something bad, I like to point it out. And even if it's not that bad, like I'll point it out and be like, "Oh, same old Pirates," with a little bit of education on the league and like all that stuff. And I love whenever DK he'll comment on whatever I say and be like, "What are you talking about?" Blah blah blah. And it's like I just love that I'm like the foil to his writing on the Pirates. It's a fun little interaction we always have.
No, I think that is the other thing. I think that's the other thing is the interaction that you want to have with your audience, because when you do this stuff, don't forget, like, people when they talk with you, they read your stuff, but they want to feel like that you're real. They don't want to like, I think that's something that we try to do at DK Pittsburgh Sports with all the live cues that we do and the happy hour from Mike's Beer Bar that we do, or
Yeah.
we get questions from fans and we work on it. Because we want you to understand, like, hey, we hear you, we see you, we're doing this for you. We're not just doing this. Um, we're not just doing this just cause we appreciate you guys giving us feedback as far as what you think. And that's like when the comment sections, I can't always be in every comment section and answer
Yeah.
every question, but I try to. And when people say things to me, like, I really appreciate it. So I encourage people to get more involved in sports. That's what makes it more fun when more people pay attention to it, more people ask questions about it, more people do things about it. Those things, they mean a lot. So I encourage anyone out there, if you ever want to reach out to me, you can follow me on Twitter at Carter Critiques. I'm not, unless you ask a really dumb question, because
Yeah.
I will do that. Like if you try to get in my business or you try to say something that's like messed up, I don't even block you. You can still read my stuff. I'll just never see your comment again.
Or you get the Yoshi gif.
Or I love how it's become a legend, man. For those who don't know, I love using my Yoshi hammer. So it's like, first of all, that's a classic commercial, Cody.
Oh, yeah.
How old are you, Cody?
I'm 24.
You're 24. I'm saying you're a baby. I'm 31.
Yeah.
I just turned 32 last Thursday too. That's crazy. But wow, I'm 8 years older than you. That's insane. I've been on the other side of this conversation so many times in my life, and so it's just wild being here where I'm like, wow, he's the young buck. But point being, when you're growing up, that Super Smash Brothers commercial when Super Smash first came out, and you had all the Mario characters just beating each other up.
Yeah.
I just love that commercial. And so when I was looking for like a bonk gift just because I wanted to bonk somebody, and that came up like, oh, that's my favorite gift ever. So now if you say something dumb, you get in the Yoshi hammer gift. I want it to be immortal, and I'm so glad it's become attached to me because people are like, "Yo, you're stealing Chris Carter's thing," and I'm like, "It's my thing, okay, sure, man."
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I've been waiting for DK to just do that on one of my Pirates tweets because I say some of the most ridiculous pirate stuff just to see who says something about it. So
I wish he would learn from the Yoshi hammer because I don't think he like, DK is very much in his pathway, right? Like to him, anything that he likes is what he like when what was it? It was when Chadwick Boseman showed up at Heinz Field. Rest in peace to Chadwick Boseman. Love everything a guy ever did. But he showed up at Heinz Field for a practice, and like DK didn't understand why everyone was so enamored. They're like, whoa. He's like, who the heck is this guy? I'm like, Black Panther. He's like, who? And I'm like,
oh man,
Jackie Robinson? He's like, oh, he did that. Oh, I guess. But like to him, it was like you couldn't understand that this huge phenomenon that was just took over the world.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay. And even if he was being sarcastic and doing that to just kind of like, but he does that a lot. Like he loves the Green Lantern, and everything outside of the Green Lantern is unimportant. Yeah. I'm like, okay, DK. But I think that's why he hasn't seen the Yoshi. He hasn't, because it's a perfect thing. Hit people with a hammer because you're not actually using violence, but it looks funny. So anyway,
absolutely. And I also want to talk to you. You are a big comic book guy.
Yeah,
I know you've gone on Joey Bag of Donuts podcast, who's also a part of the Pod Hub Network, and talked about WandaVision. I think you stepped in on the episode. He wanted me to come on, but I hadn't seen it yet. And then you came on. You guys had a great episode. So just talk about your connection with comic books and all that.
Well, when I was a little kid, I grew up in the again, you're so young. When I was in kindergarten, Fox Kids was the stuff. Because as soon as I got out of school, my dad picked me up from daycare. We would race home to make sure we caught Batman, the animated series.
Yep.
And then in the early 90s, man, woohoo, you get some Batman. Like that's still the best version of Batman I've ever seen in any medium. Comic, movie, TV, whatever. That Batman, the animated series with Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill as the Joker, that is the best continuity. And then, of course, how that expanded into the Superman series, the Justice League series, Justice League Unlimited. That, to me, is the best universe that I've ever seen constructed. And, that's the people who did that were just amazing. But then you also had the X-Men and on Fox Kids and all this. And I love that. But then my uncle Ben, who was a huge comic book collector for years, he one time brought a crate of comic books, and he brought it to Pittsburgh because he lived in Virginia, and he handed me a crate, and it was like it wasn't the original X-Men, but it was like from the X-Men from when like Wolverine and Storm and Nightcrawler and Colossus joined for like years after that. And then there were a bunch of other randoms in there. Man, Cody, I read that thing for years. Like there were so many comics in this crate. And then the other thing was, if you went to my Uncle Ben's house, there was a basement full of crates like this. And It took me years to finish the one crate that he gave me. But it was spectacular. And I fell in love with the X-Men. The X-Men are still my favorite team in all of comics and stuff. But then, when the movies started coming out, at first I actually didn't dig the movies too much. Like, like the early Batman movies, whatever. I still say Batman '89 is overrated because the first the first 10 minutes are amazing. Like, the "Where are you? I'm Batman." Like that
Yeah.
scene, maybe the best live action footage of a Batman in movie history. But outside of that, I thought all those Batman movies were bad. I liked the Dark Knight series, that was cool, but like, and like the X-Men movies for the most part were good, but like I wasn't a fan of Captain America 1. I wasn't a fan of Thor 1. I wasn't a fan of the Edward Norton Hulk. I thought Iron Man 1 and 2 were cool. But it wasn't until the Avengers happened where I was like, okay, Marvel's got something here. And then I felt like they've just had home run after home run and a couple doubles and a triple and a strikeout here and there, but they've been spectacular. I've loved them. And it's really cool to be able to talk with my dad and my uncles who, they're all nerds in their own ways.
Yeah.
And expand upon that. And then you meet people like Joey who are just, such a nice guy, and we talk about it all the time and, do all those things. So yeah, I absolutely love that kind of stuff. So I'm still much of a nerd and a geek. I can't wait for Falcon and the Winter Soldier to come out this Friday.
Yeah.
I loved WandaVision. I love Star Wars. I'm also an anime nerd. Like, I like a lot of those mediums, and so sometimes my girlfriend's like, chill, like you need to put that in its box. But she's also understood why the stories, they seem childish, but then when you get into them, like, okay,
Exactly.
it's just a different medium to tell these versions of stories. So I still love it, and I still check stuff out all the time.
Yeah, and when it comes to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I just want to point out your commentary about it specifically on Twitter. It gave me a different perspective of the show because, after I watched the first episode, I was like, oh, I'm a little more interested in the Winter Soldier story than I am Sam's story. But then I see your takes on it and everything, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm starting to understand more of what that side of the show is about. And then I think we saw it a lot more in the second episode whenever they went and saw Isaiah and they're in the Baltimore neighborhood. And I think I'm glad that that's a big part of this storyline, is just kind of bringing that to the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely, man. The one thing that I think gets lost, and one thing that I think there could be books upon books of, are the lost Black people that we have forgotten in American history, and that's kind of what they're doing with Sam. Like, he's seeing that, like, he's being pushed aside for this. They told him, like, hey, we're just gonna put this shield in the Smithsonian, and you just leave it there, and it'll be fine. And nope, we're using this to give it to another Captain America because we didn't want you to be Captain America.
Yeah.
And then he learned, and then Bucky shows him, here's a guy who also was Captain America back in World War II, and they locked him up because of it. And it makes you think of, like, if Joe Lewis's story. Joe Lewis, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, was a All-American, went to World War II and did stuff for the Army then, and came back home, beat Matt Schmeling, and all the history that he had. Joe Lewis was robbed of every penny he ever made. And no one would give him sponsorship. And if you look up the documentaries and the research on him, I mean, Coca-Cola, when Joe Lewis was broke and needed money, Coca-Cola as a company got Max Schmeling, the Nazi boxer, to be an endorser. They paid him to be a face of their company before they paid Joe Lewis, and they didn't even pay Joe Lewis, and he died poor. And then you find out, like, Joe Lewis was actually also one of the first ever Black professional golfers in this country. And after being a national hero, an international hero, really, he was cast aside, and people would attack him and things like that. And it was just so sad to see what happened to him. And he's one of the people we know. There's so many Black people out there you come across, you're like, man, you are a superhero, and no one knows about you. Why? Because no one cared about you. And you, as you go through our history, you find more and more of these guys. That was another reason I was so enamored with Black history. And I still am. I'm reading a book about a new book on Malcolm X that came out like back in December. It's called, or October. It's called The Dead Are Rising, and it unearths, like, a lot of the things that Black people had to do to survive in racist America, where we've been hunted, we've been killed. I mean, my family, the origins of my father, his mother, like his side of the family, they came to Pittsburgh from Lynchburg, Virginia, because her great grandfather got into it with the Klan out there, and he ran away. And first he ran to DC, but then, like, his family found out he was in DC, and they were like, please come back, we need you to help with sharecropping because we're sharecropping. That's all we can do. And then eventually he got into it again with the clan down there, and he was like, you know what, I'm running away. So he runs away to Pittsburgh, and that's where he starts the family here. And there's so many stories like that of people running from fear from racism, and even here in the North, it wasn't just the South. So to me, in Falcon and Winter Soldier, when you're seeing Sam experience it today, because those things still exist today. Like, when he goes to the bank and the bank guy's like, hey, I love you, man. Let me get my picture with you. But then I can't give you this loan. Even though you're a superhero that just saved the actual universe. That's what a lot of Black people go through, is they sacrifice their bodies, their minds, and then they're just like, oh, thank you for your service. And here's nothing for it. And, meanwhile, there's a lot of white heroes who they get those benefits. Not everyone, and there's horrible stories for everybody. But you see, when you look at the numbers, you look at the history, it usually pales out that this is where racism divides us. So I love that they're doing that with this part of the story and showing Sam and and showing how he deals with it. I hope that he comes out for this a stronger person and doesn't he stands up to it better, because I felt like Luke Cage empowerment, I felt like they needed to do that better in that show on Netflix. But yeah, I love what they're doing. I'm glad that you I'm glad what I was saying got you to think about that more.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I said, like I was like, oh, I want to know more about Bucky's story of trying to redeem himself.
Right. And I want to know more about Bucky's
story. Absolutely.
But it's like immediately, like when Sam went home and his family's dealing with the financial problems, and he is realizing that like all this work that he did for the rest of the world got him nothing. And he's like, dang, I get that. Like a perfect example. Not a perfect example, but I told you how we fought for those scholarships when I was at Cheney. So we fought for those scholarships, right? Now, one of the scholarships that was available was to help to pay for your law school or med school if you were at the top of your class at Cheney and you got accepted to Pitt, Temple, or Penn State. Well, I finished summa cum laude. I got accepted to Pitt Law. I was the first in line for this scholarship. Only the summer before I get the scholarship, and I've graduated Cheney, I've enrolled at Pitt, I've paid my initial fees to get in there, and I'm supposed to have a full scholarship, books, tuition, everything taken care of. I get a call from Pashy. It says, we've been directed by the governor's office to not give you the scholarship. And I said, excuse me? And I said, so like everyone? He's like, no, they said just you. And I'm like, was there a reason? And I was like, well, we have been told to not tell you. And I said, and the person who told me on the phone was obviously an ally, and she was a person I'd spoken with before. And I was like, is this because I was out front, fighting for this? And she looked at me. She kind of like said like, I can't say, but. And I was like, okay, I get the message here. And so I lost out on tens of thousands of dollars of debt freeness to my law school education, which also impacted how I studied. I had to work jobs in law school that I didn't plan on working. And it was, that I get it. I fought, it's like crazy. I fought for this scholarship, and then, all these people, and I had even classmates at Pitt who were from Cheney who benefited from the scholarship that, saw me struggling. And it was like, dang, like that's how that happens. So I relate entirely to Sam when he's like, dang, like we got nothing out of this, but you still want to go out there. Like he's out there fighting bad guys, and he doesn't, because he knows this is important work. And at the end of the day, if I'm able to help people, what will I do when I go before God after my life's over? And I say, and he asked me, did you do everything you could with your life? And I say there, no, I felt like just stepping back a bit, or yeah, God, I did everything I could for this fight and for my family.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate your commentary on it, because it helps me to understand the story more, obviously. So Chris, I want to thank you for coming on. This is an awesome conversation. I really had a good time talking to you. Everybody go check out Chris on Twitter at Carter Critiques, I believe it is.
Yes, Carter
Critiques. Check him out on Locked On Steelers, DK Pittsburgh Sports. He's everywhere. Just go check him out. If you go on the internet, you'll find him.
Thank you so
all
much.
The links will be in the description as well. And Chris, thank you once again for coming on.
Thank you. At any time.